Our next speaker is a true automation expert who brings a wealth of knowledge, experience, and passion to our industry. He has held a number of high-profile roles within the robotics and automation industry. In 2018, he was recognised as a manufacturing champion in the Elite Manufacturers Top 100 and is a published author, as well as making several television appearances, including on the BBC. I'm sure I speak on behalf of all humans and robots to say that we're incredibly honoured and excited to have with us today Mike Wilson, Chairman of BARA, the British Robotics and Automation Association, and Managing Director of KUKA Robotics UK. Please welcome to the stage our keynote speaker, Mike Wilson.
I think that's probably the best introduction I've ever had. Maybe robots are good for something. So I'm going to talk about UK manufacturing and do we need more robots. Now I will sort of start by saying I'm a little biased, but hopefully you'll bear with me and you'll agree with me by the end of the presentation. Today manufacturing faces a number of significant challenges, productivity being one major challenge. Currently, UK productivity is about 20% below our major competitors. The government has been in print to say that in the UK, it takes us 5 days to make something that in Germany or France, they can make in 4. That's a problem. To be competitive going forward, we need to address that productivity challenge. We all know we've got Brexit, maybe not, coming around the corner. I'm not going to spend any time on that one. But one of the things that's come out of the back of Brexit is a lack of labour. Manufacturing today is struggling to get the workforce it needs to make the things that it wants to make. We also have a skill shortage. We're not producing enough engineers through our education system. A lot of our current engineers are getting older, they're retiring, and we need to address that as well. But ultimately, the big challenge is we don't invest in capital equipment. Not just robots, but all forms of capital equipment. The All-Party Parliamentary Manufacturing Group commissioned a study about 4 years ago, looking at the culture of UK manufacturing, and they called it Making Good. And I like to think they picked that title on purpose. If I can summarise a 50-odd page report in a couple of sentences, basically, they said, in the UK, we're very proud that we keep all of our old machines running. And in Germany, they're very proud that they bought new ones. And that, to me, kind of really highlights the problem. We do keep all of our old machines running. We don't invest in the latest equipment, the latest technologies. And it's driven by our culture. We need to achieve short-term returns. Most manufacturing businesses are looking at 12-month, 18-month payback on their investments. And hopefully I can explain why that's really a false economy. We have, over the last number of years, tended to import relatively low-cost labour. We've used that rather than automation. We don't like taking risks. And in terms of robot automation, it's perceived as a challenge. It's perceived as difficult and risky. None of those factors are really true. So where do we stand in comparison with the rest of the world? This is the latest data from the International Federation of Robotics. Robot density, number of robots per 10,000 workers. So it's a relative measure. When you look through that chart, you'll see that the UK doesn't actually appear, which is a little embarrassing. We're supposed to be the 9th largest manufacturing nation in the world. We're actually 22nd in terms of our use of robots. And we're below the world average. We're now behind China, despite the fact that they've got millions and millions and millions of workers, and they started this journey a lot later than we did. The rest of the world is accelerating, and all we're doing really is standing still. We're falling further and further behind. And just to show you how we are doing, this is UK sales data that's collected by BARA. So this is orders received, so it is quite current. And you can see that there are a number of peaks over the years. Those peaks tend to be driven by investments in the automotive sector. They make a big difference to the UK numbers. We have now got Q3 2019 data. That was about 450 units, so we're still slightly behind where we were in 2018. So robot installations in the UK will be lower this year than they were last year, lower than they were the year before. We're going in the wrong direction. And that's despite the benefits. And the benefits are proven. Better utilisation of space and energy. Robots, yes, they use energy, but they use it more efficiently. Improved productivity. We get more out for what we put in. You get more from the other equipment that you have. So, for example, if you have machine tools that are being loaded and unloaded manually, you'll typically get 65–70% utilisation out of those machine tools. If you put robot automation on there to do the loading and unloading, you can increase that utilisation to 90%, just so you get more out of your existing investments. And ultimately, better utilisation of the staff. We have too many workers that are literally picking things up and putting them somewhere else. People palletising on the end of production lines. We're not using their skills and attributes. We should use our staff where they can add value to the product. And where we've got people that are doing robotic type jobs, we should be using robots. Robots are better at it than people. Robots give you consistency. To be fair, if you set them up wrong, you get consistent garbage. But if you set them up right, you get consistent high quality. Reducing waste, reducing damage, less waste, less rework. All of that's beneficial. All of it is worth money. And all of it improves productivity. And that leads to improved competitiveness. But the other benefits of robots, maybe compared with other forms of automation, is you get flexibility. You can accommodate design changes. You can reprogram the robots to do slightly different products. You can extend production hours. There are facilities that run overnight with nobody in the factory. There's a small factory in Luton, for example, that produces industrial floor tiles. And they have a robot system that unloads their injection moulding machines. They have 2 people in that factory. To be fair, they could run it with 1 because they need to load the granules into the moulding machines, but legally they're not allowed to run it with 1. And they can run overnight. There's another factory in Kent that runs, literally loads up the automation and runs overnight with nobody in the factory. During the day they run the specials and they use the workers, but at night they run the standard product. You improve health and safety because you take the workers away from the dull, the dangerous, the dirty jobs. And ultimately, you give people more rewarding jobs where their skills are adding value. They're using their attributes. And a quote from Henry Ford goes back a long time, but I think this is very realistic in today's age. If you need a machine and don't buy it, then ultimately you'll find that you've paid for it and don't have it. My take on that is that you're spending that money every hour, every day. And unless you do something different, you will continue to spend that money. And this is about thinking longer term. It's not about a 12-month payback. The equipment's going to last 10 years plus. There are robots in this country that are 20 years old and they're still running successfully. The return on investment that those companies have had on that is many times over. It's not about a 1-year payback. It's about thinking where you want to be in 5 or 10 years' time. And there is an industry that's done it, and done it very successfully, and that's our car industry. They've improved productivity significantly over the last few years. They're producing more than 50% per hour than they were in 2009. And they've done that by utilising new technology. And yes, robots are a key element of that. Thousands of robots have gone into our car factories. But it hasn't reduced employment. They've created thousands of jobs at the same time. And I would argue that if they hadn't put the automation in, they wouldn't have built the car factories in this country, and none of those jobs would be here. People have done studies to determine how productive could we be. This is one I particularly like. It's from the Copenhagen Business School. They looked at different industry sectors. They looked at different countries across Europe. And they measured those that were most automated, those that were most productive. And the UK was last in terms of productivity on every sector. And we were also the lowest automation user. They then modelled what would happen if we implemented a step change to catch up with the most automated. And it would increase our productivity by over 22%. Now that closes the gap with the rest of the world instantly. So I'm not saying robots are the only answer, but they're certainly a very significant part of the answer in terms of closing our productivity gap. And yes, with a step change, there would be a short-term decrease in employment, but only short-term. Because as our industries get more competitive, they grow, they employ more people. And the people they employ are doing better paid jobs. There are companies in the UK that are successfully using automation and robots. It's not all bad news, and it's not all in the automotive sector. They're generally taking operators away from the repetitive, the mundane, the dirty tasks. They get better jobs, and it gives them a competitive advantage. It gives them the financial returns, and that then leads to growth and then more jobs. It's a positive circle. And we need more businesses to be thinking where they want to be in 5 or 10 years' time and figuring out how to start this journey. I'll come back to how we're going to help in a minute. The government has been a challenge over the last few years, but they have actually recognised that automation has a direct impact on productivity. They developed an industrial strategy a few years ago, which then led to the Made Smarter review. I don't know if anybody's read their report, but it's about 300 or 400 pages. It's quite a chunky report. This was all about Industry 4 technologies. And the conclusion from that report, that study, which involved an awful lot of people from some very big companies in the UK, identified that the use of Industry 4 technologies could be worth over £450 billion to the UK economy over the next 10 years. That's a really big number. But robotics and automation was actually the biggest individual component of that. Could be worth £180 billion to the UK economy. And all we have to do is do what the rest of the world is doing. We're not designing new things, we're not developing new technologies, we're really just about catching up with what the rest of the world is doing. Now, unfortunately, not much has happened with Made Smarter so far. They've set up a Northwest pilot, and they are providing some support in the Northwest to businesses that want to start on that journey. It hasn't spread to the rest of the UK yet. Government's kind of busy with something else at the moment. Hopefully they'll get past that, and then they'll put some more effort into Made Smarter. But the other thing that did happen fairly recently is they increased the annual investment allowance. It's now £1 million, and it'll run 2 years from January this year. That effectively means that you can get government money to help cover the investment, provided your accountants know how to do it. You pay less tax. So there's a benefit there, and I'm not sure how many people are taking this up, but there's opportunities there. You can get money from R&D tax credits to help in terms of the investments. So there are ways of getting government money to help fund some of these investments and maybe make the business case less risky. There are some challenges. We are seeing growing interest from new users, particularly as a consequence of Brexit. There's a labour shortage out there. So people are starting to think, how do we solve this labour problem? How can we automate? And they're starting to ask the questions. But there are challenges in that respect. We have quite a number of systems integrators in the UK who can provide the solutions that the businesses want. But the good integrators are already busy. And there are some integrators out there who are less good. And the challenge is understanding which is which. The new users generally don't have the knowledge and expertise to develop the right solutions, to come up with the concepts. So how do you, when you walk around the factory for the first time and say we need to use robots, how do you come up with the solution? Which application are you going to pick? And the key to that, in my mind, is find something that's relatively easy. Don't find the most difficult application. Even if the return on investment is a bit longer, it's about recognising that there is a learning curve, so start with an easy application and move on from there. Most end users in general industry struggle to identify what their requirements are going to be. They kind of know, maybe they've got as far as identifying it's going to be a palletizing system, but how do you specify that? How do you write a scope of supply that you can then give to integrators to quote against? The automotive industry has been doing this for years. They know how to do it. But a lot of people haven't done this before and they don't know how to do it. But it's a key element of ensuring that you get what it is you want. Integrators don't understand your factory. They don't understand your operation. You need to be able to give them all the detail in terms of what's going to be required so that when they quote it to you, they've included for all of those elements. So you don't get any nasty surprises when the system is installed. There are issues around safety standards. A lot of people don't necessarily understand how to do risk assessments, particularly in relationship to collaborative robots. Collaborative robots are great, and they are safe. It's the application that's the key. If you put a knife, for example, in the end of a collaborative robot, it is no longer safe. It needs to be guarded. If a collaborative robot is working on a machine tool, it needs to be guarded. The robot might be safe, it's what it's actually doing that's important. And the end users need to understand that. Partly to make sure that their factory is safe, but also partly because they're responsible, as well as the supplier, but the end user is equally responsible for that installation. So it's important to understand the relevant safety standards before you get into this. And it's also key in terms of selecting suppliers. How do you measure whether one supplier is better than another? Some of that is about the user requirement specification. Some of it is about going to see installations that they've done elsewhere, getting testimonials from them. But there are, unfortunately, people out there that will claim to be robot integrators who aren't necessarily having the right expertise or the right knowledge to deliver these systems. And it's risky for people that have never done it for the first time because they just don't necessarily know how to pick those suppliers. So just to say a little bit about the association, and then I'll try and explain how or what we're trying to do to help. The British Automation Robot Association has been around a long time, 38 years, in various forms, and we've been supporting the use of robots throughout UK manufacturing for all of that time. Our membership is principally the robot automation supply chain, but we're there really to act as the voice of automation. We're there to promote the use of robots throughout UK manufacturing. So we organise educational events. We get involved in conferences and seminars, things like this, where we will speak, trying to spread the word. We do get involved in exhibitions. We have relationships with other trade associations, with the International Federation of Robotics, and Suzanne's here and she'll be talking to you later. And through our relationships, we also talk to government. So, for example, one of the select committees last year did a study, earlier this year, did a study on automation and the future of work. And we were very pleased that in their very first paragraph, they said that the problem in the UK is not that we've got too many robots, it's that we've got too few. And for that to come out of a government group was actually quite a success, because normally the politicians are very wary about promoting automation. So we're starting to get the message into government, but we need to spread it more widely. We need all of UK manufacturing to be looking at their facilities to identify where there are opportunities to put robots in and to start the journey in terms of implementing those solutions. So what we're doing to try and help is we have produced some guides, simple guides just to give people some steps, as it were, things to think about as you embark on this journey. We provide access to independent consultants, so people whose job it is to actually advise. They're not tied to robot suppliers, they're not tied to systems integrators. They can give a completely independent view as to whether that's the right application and who the suppliers might be. And we've just launched a certification program for the systems integrators. We've taken this from something that the association in the USA has done for many years, and we've effectively copied what they've done. They've certified 36 integrators in the US, basically as a way of identifying who the good integrators are versus those that may be less good. And the key to this is it helps them justify to the end users why they might be charging a little bit more. They're charging a little bit more because they know what's involved in delivering the system. You will get a good system from them doing the work. But if you've got no way of identifying who the good ones are, you don't necessarily understand that. So this certification program is about giving the good ones the opportunity to differentiate themselves from everybody else, to help the new users select the right integrators. But not only for the first project, but also for long-term relationships. There's a company in Whitney, near Oxford, that produce JSP. They produce safety equipment, helmets and so on. They put their first robot in, I don't know, it's probably about 12 years ago now. They've got about 50 robots in the facility, and they're only making safety helmets. Now, just to talk about jobs just for 1 minute, they still employ the same number of people as they did 12 years ago. Maybe not exactly the same people, but the same number of people. They've got much more skilled people. The reason they employ the same number of people is that they've expanded. They've grown as a result of their improved productivity. But the key thing to me is they started on relatively simple applications, just unloading moulding machines. They've now got a fully automated system that makes the entire safety helmet, including the strapping on the inside, assembling the whole thing. It's quite a complex system, but they've been through the journey of learning how to do that. And they've done all of that with one systems integrator. They've learnt together. And things were not perfect all of the time. There were problems, but they worked together to solve those problems. And it's been mutually beneficial for both of them. And to me, that long-term relationship is a key element of that, is they're committed to work together. Ultimately, through the certification program, we hope to improve the technical capabilities of the integrators by recognising the good ones, raise their standards, and ultimately to increase the capacity for robot integration in the UK. Because one of the problems we do potentially face is if everybody suddenly decided that they wanted to put robots in, there aren't enough good systems integrators out there to deliver that. So we need to be able to develop the capabilities. And overall, the more successes we get, success will then breed more success. And the market for robots will grow in the UK. So in conclusion, I think, I hope you all agree, UK manufacturing must be competitive. We really do need UK manufacturing to be successful. It's a very key element of our economy. And to be successful, we have to invest in automation. And we need flexibility. And therefore we need robot solutions. Ultimately, it's about working smarter, not harder. Give the staff the tools they need to do their jobs efficiently. Don't having them picking things up, moving them around. Keep them employed on tasks where they can add value. This quote here, sweat the assets, not the people, actually came from a bank manager. It was a small aerospace company, and the owner had kind of plateaued. He couldn't figure out how to make his business bigger. And his bank manager said to him, sweat the assets, not the people. Invest in the equipment. Give the staff the tools, and you will grow. And he did grow. It did work. So I would just recommend to everybody, please, walk around your factories, look for opportunities, talk to people about how you might implement robot solutions. And if you need help, BARA is here to help. Thank you very much.